politely that way, but I think that works.
Okay, Christine, we're now live. I'm going to waffle for a minute because it takes a little bit of time for people to actually come in. But what I will say is I'm really excited about this particular conversation because, God, I was trying to work it out before I got up this morning. I think we met about 40 years ago, or is it longer than that? I think
it's a long time ago. I mean, once it gets beyond 20, it's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is about 40 years ago, when I was married to the individual who I ended up being very pleased to leave. But we met then and we worked together then, and it was incredible. Anyway, let me just say to everybody who this is. This is Christine Mansfield. So as you're gathering while we're chatting, that I met Christine about 40 years ago, and we started working together when I was married to Dennis, and that's when you were doing things probably much more processy than we do now. And after I left him, we'd become very good friends after I left him and decided I was going to design this program. You were absolutely key in being able to talk everything through, and you were very key in helping me design the responsibility model. And there were all sorts of the program that I discussed with you and talked through with you. You were the first person, I believe, who ever became a trainer. And wow, that was hilarious, because having designed and ran the program a few times, I hadn't got a clue how I was going to train other people to do it. And we sort of made it up as we went along, surrounded by dogs while we were doing it, in the most slap happy fashion, trying to work it out. And since then, we've stayed on the journey together and you've been key in delivering the program and supporting the Living Leader since the very, very beginning. You've been a key part of it. So I think what would be lovely, Christine, I think a lot of people do know you and know you very well, but it would be great if you could give a little insight into your journey, probably, I was going to say from the very beginning, and that's entirely up to you, but just give a little insight into you, who you are, and what inspired you to work with us for as long as you have done.
Well, I think I'll sort of probably go backwards and forwards a little, but I'll start with why I ended up in Northamptonshire, because that's where we met. And prior to that, I'd been working in a corporate environment, and then I was lucky enough, I met someone, we married, and I had a son. But he came along at the age of 5 because he was my husband's son. So I literally gave up my job on Friday night and became a mum on Saturday morning.
Wow.
So mildly life-changing in a moment. And I learned so much from him and from becoming a mum. But the biggest problem at that time was, what I noticed about myself in that moment was I'd lost my identity. And I don't think I'd realised how much my identity had become part of who I was at work, part of my suit. And suddenly I wasn't wearing a suit for a while, and I really struggled. I was trying to think, but I don't know who I am, and I needed a label on it. And my husband's job took us up to Northampton. So I all the contacts I'd had where I might get a little bit of work here and there, I didn't have anymore. And that's where I met you. And I met you through Lucy, your daughter, because I went to the beauty salon. And as you do, you pour your heart out to somebody. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And I knew, but she said, you should meet my mum. And I arrived at your place to a sea of dogs running at me, which was mildly daunting, but really great fun. And I knew instantly that you were someone who was going to, this always sounds weird, but I think I've often looked for people I knew would throw me in at the deep end, because I won't necessarily jump, but I'll look for someone who'll just tip me over the edge, and it gives me that opportunity to swim. And I've never forgotten the very first piece of work I did with you was a massive recruitment job for a huge computer center. And I'd never recruited in my life, and it was definitely off at the deep end. So that's how we came to meet. And we went on an exploration, I think, together, because both our lives were changing, and we read all sorts of books and discussed them. And so that was very influential. But you actually took that and created this program. The first part of it, you really had a vision in your mind. And yes, it was very kind of you to say I helped, but you had that vision. And I remember you saying to me, I need you to come on the program because I want you to be a trainer. I'm not a trainer. I don't know why you want, but I'll come on the program. And I came on the program, and so many things that have been happening throughout my life, particularly since becoming a mum, began to fall into place. And there were just a few messages throughout, and they all linked together and gave me a massive insight. And it's ever since then, it's just been such a privilege and a pleasure working with all of everyone we work with, and all of the materials, and just the experiences that it brings, because you never stop learning about yourself while you're involved in helping other people to learn. So it's just been an amazing experience. But it's amazing how, we might say it's the universe and timing and all sorts of things, but that message came exactly at the time when I was really starting to struggle with, I really don't know who I am anymore. I've spent years trying to be the suit I wear, which was really strange.
I mean, I know quite a bit about your life before sort of we met, but what are the things that got you into position of feeling that you were just a suit?
Well, not helped by when I finally got the job I'd been striving to get for many years. I finally got that job against all the odds. I've been told for years that, well, you haven't got the right qualifications, you're not a man, basically, and, you haven't got any experience. I don't know how to put any one of those right, unless you give me a chance. And I finally got an opportunity, but I was told on day one that I was the token woman. And it wasn't conscious, but I think what happened was I felt I had to become almost a carbon copy of all the men around me in order to be good enough to be doing that job.
But from memory, you were in sales, weren't you? A lot of the time you were in sales, and you achieved outstanding results all the time. Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
You were nearly always the highest performer, and yet that still stayed. And do you know, Christine, do you remember a client that we worked with very early on? God, I've never forgotten this. Very early on, where we took the program into an entire police force, Bedfordshire Police Force. I don't know. I mean, when I look back and I think then, I think a lot of the women there had the same problem. They were trying to prove they had more balls than the men. And they were quite often more challenging to deal with on the program than the men were.
Yeah.
Because in those days, we were running them from where I lived at the time. So we were running them from there. And I always remember you coming in to deliver a program one day, and they had a lot of issues with people from ethnic minorities and everything else. And they had a lot of it. And you walked in to deliver this program, and you're not small, you're quite tall, a lot taller than I am. And you came in and you came out of coffee break, said, God, I walked in and I was looking up like this at all of them, absolutely huge. And if you had women coming into that position, they nearly always had to be ruthless. Do you
Yeah,
remember coming across some of those?
I do, and I can identify with that. It's almost like you think I've got to be more of that in order to be okay around here. I often describe it. I mean, you know, this was the early 80s. Anybody who's ever watched Dynasty, do you remember Linda Gray's shoulder pads out to here? And my shoulders aren't small in the first place, so by the time you add 6-inch shoulder pads on them, I describe it as I'd open the wardrobe in the morning and put on my Iron Man suit.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was almost as if as I put the jacket on, click, I became the suit. And it served me. I survived for quite a long time, but as a result of that, I ended up in hospital for a long time because the stress of trying to be something that you're not eventually takes its toll, and you don't realize how much you're having to double and treble think everything before you even speak. It's interesting, but it's like I've got to be the toughest in order to seem as strong.
You see, that's leading me to wanting to ask you. Our journey of delivering the program started almost together. You were running them, I was running them, you know, and we sort of just kicked off somehow. What were your early experiences of delivering the program like? Because again, I chucked you in at the deep end. I didn't just chuck me in at the deep end. I chucked you in at the deep end, and we were learning as we went along. But what were your early experiences of delivering the program like?
Well, my very first experience was a day 3 when I hadn't been part of the first 2 days, because you had to rush off to a court appearance for. I mean, you weren't you hadn't done anything wrong, I might add, but you had to go and be in court on that day, and you were out of control of the date. And you said to me, "What do you think? Do you think you could just step in, or do we need to cancel it?" And I said, I'll do it. And it was phenomenal. But I remember being in a sort of bubble of a daze almost, standing there saying hello to all these people who I haven't met. And the person who came in, who you'd said to me, this person, you know, it's really important that they get a great experience here because they're thinking about taking it into their company. And I remember him coming in, and he hugged me, and it was just a shock because of everything I'd heard and learned and so on. And I'd remembered him turning up because your training programs used to be at your home, and so I'd seen this person on the first 2 days, but I hadn't met them. And he turned up, and he was suited, booted with a case, a briefcase, whereas everybody else came in really casual clothes. And this time he was casual, and he gave me this hug. And I remember everybody else hearing what had been going on for him for a couple of weeks, being totally, I mean, jaws on the floor. He had completely turned his life around to the point where literally everything he was doing in the opposite way. He said, I always used to come into work, listen to the news, get in, write myself a list of all things I was going to get done, and then I was going to go and talk to some people. He said, now I come in, I like heavy metal music, I listen to that all the way in, so by the time I come in, I'm really on top of the world. First thing I do is go and talk to people, and only then do I come and sit down and approach my list. And he said, you know what? I still get everything done. And we were all just sat there, and everybody else who'd obviously been with him for the first 2 days just saw this. And that was so exciting. So although it had been a bit daunting, it was so exciting to think someone can take some of these ideas. It's not just that, you know, it made a change for me. People can take these ideas and really do something different with them to change their lives. Incredible. So I've never forgotten that moment. It stays with me at all times. And, you know, even when I'm approaching a program where I'm thinking, you know, these are all really senior people in this huge organization. And I don't mind admitting, I still get butterflies before that. And then I think about that moment and think, but there was somebody who, you know, if you can just share one thing that could help somebody turn something around, why wouldn't you want to do that? It's just amazing. So that's my first memory.
I mean, amazing that you've got such a clear memory of it. Wow, that really impacted, and it's great that it has. But what impact do you think it's had on you over the long term through delivering this program?
Well, the wonder of that's an interesting word, actually. I think it is continual wonder, because when things change, you know, you're in that place of wonder when things first change, and they changed for me dramatically. But actually, the fact that I get to keep seeing that happen for other people maintains that wonder. It's just phenomenal, really. And the other part about it is, in so many ways, it's not things that we don't know. It's just things we haven't grasped. And what I mean by that is we know them here, but as you always say, unless it's like I call it the sucker punch. Unless you get that sucker punch that says, oh, hang on, no, that's really me. Unless you get that from something and it only lands here, knowing it doesn't change anything, as we know. So watching those moments for people have just continued to keep that wonder alive. It's just amazing to me. My life changed in a heartbeat. I've always told you that it was a silver bullet between my eyes, and I know the exact moment that the program changed my life, and it's incredible.
How many programs do you think you've delivered over the years?
I knew you'd ask me that. I have no idea, is the honest truth, but it's hundreds of programs, and of course lots of trainer programs as well. So it's been amazing.
Just tell me, there are so many different bits to the program, so many different bits. And I have to admit, I got asked the impossible question, and this was on the evening of day one. I still remember it was fairly recently, probably less than a year ago. And I joined the group for dinner, and on the evening of day one, and one of them said, if you had to pick one bit of the program that you think is most impactful, what would it be? I thought, oh my God, it was not an easy one, especially when they were asking me on day one, and I knew that there would maybe something a bit later that I thought that was interesting. But if I had to ask you that question, you know, accepting I know there's lots of it, but if I had to say to you, what is one bit that you think would be most transformational for you, what would it be?
Well, so I know the moment that was transformational for me, and it was that particular understanding that made the change. But the thing with the program, and the reason it's so hard, I think, is because everything actually links together. It's almost as if in that moment somebody tipped the cards and they all just fell. And it was the session that we call Give Get that did that for me. But it was because in that moment, I realized so many other things. I've just been talking about, you know, my Ironman suit. What I realized was I've become the mask I've been wearing, you know, and it was a big mask, and it seemed to be serving me, but it was only serving the person I thought I needed to be. I'd lost myself. And you know, if I think about the beliefs that were driving that, then I developed such a strong belief that being just me would never be good enough. But in that moment, what I realized was what I'd been doing, therefore, as a result of that, was trying to control my outcomes in every single circumstance. And I'd become totally obsessed with what everybody would think of me all the time. And so I was focused the whole time on things I had no control over instead of focusing on me. People could have told me that in any way they like, and I wouldn't have got it. I'm sure they had told me that. People have been telling me for ages, it's okay to say no sometimes. But I never said no. I would always find a way to say yes to everybody, especially my friends. But when I finally realized that if you focus on give instead, and really what you can bring to something, because that's all you can do, bring what you have, and you give of yourself in that moment, everything in your life turns around, because your own thinking turns around, and therefore everything you experience turns around. So that was the moment of transformation. But it worked because all those other cards were starting to lean, and then that was the one that suddenly they all fell into place. And it was like that silver bullet.
You see, I remember, because funnily enough, that's the thing that more than anything changed my life. But I can still remember you on that first program, and you were very low in confidence, and your confidence grew almost exponentially. It was fascinating to see it. And I think that's where, for me, Give Get had such an impact. Similar to you, you know, people had to think what I was doing was good. People had to think it was okay. Didn't believe them when they told me it was, but all the time looking for other people to say it's great. Even then, I'd still believe it wasn't good enough. And I think that finally doing your damnedest to let go of that. I don't know about you, but sometimes it can still come up and kick me in the bum. But really finally recognizing that all you can do is go and give all you have to give. When I think of, and you and I have seen it in work, we've observed people in work time and again, that because people are more worried about what people think of them, they miss really key opportunities. So, for example, when they know something needs to be challenged, but they could be unpopular if they challenge it, they don't do it. And it may be really key. I always come back to, as you know, it's in my Living Leader book. When you think about Challenger and Columbia, and you think that people died as a result of that, and yet people further down the organization actually knew and expected that some of those challenges were there. They knew that there might be a problem with the O-rings. They kept trying to say it, but nobody heard them. And so they probably end up thinking, well, I can't go on doing this because I'll be unpopular. People will get very cross, and all of this. And yet, if they'd held on to understanding, they'd have gone on pushing, challenging, questioning. But we don't do it because we're too worried about what people will think about us. And yes, it's such a simple concept. Such a simple concept.
Such a simple concept. But it also then, what it made me think about afterwards was how that had literally changed the way I behaved. Because, yeah, it changed my thinking. But before, I had lots of coping strategies. I had the suits. That's a coping strategy. I became the suit. But even in my personal life, I mean, if I was going out, I would cry off. I didn't go. I would work myself into such a frenzy. I can't go. Nobody will want to talk to me. I've got nothing interesting to say. Why would they want me there? But all these things would go through my head. But if I went, I had a coping strategy, which was always go and get a drink. So I've got something in my hand, because for some reason your hands feel massive, don't they, when you're nervous. Go and get a drink, and just keep telling yourself you're okay. You're absolutely fine. And that's what I did. I'm absolutely fine. I'm absolutely fine. And I would walk around like this. And I always think it's strange how you get more than one message when you're. I remember you once saying, well, when you're ready, it's amazing what you hear. And in the same week as I did the program, a very blunt male friend of mine gave me a piece of feedback. I won't be quite as blunt as he was, but he did say, Christine, would you actually like to meet someone when you're out and about? Yes. He said, he literally did this. He said, you might want to remove the F off that's on your forehead then. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you're so unapproachable. I said, me, unapproachable? He said, I know that. He said, but I've watched you. You walk around with your nose in the air like you don't need anyone. He said, so why would anybody come and talk to you? And I was about to come back and say, well, I don't do that. And then I thought about my coping strategy, and everything about my coping strategy was leading to me doing exactly that, and therefore causing all the things that I'd been worrying about before I went. So I was reinforcing it all myself, coming home saying, see, I knew nobody would talk to me. So it just got worse for the next occasion.
So what behavior did you change? What did you do differently?
I just, as a result, before the next thing I was invited to was a wedding. And they're always quite tricky on your own. But this particular one was my physio. So the only person I knew was the bride. So I decided I was going to go. And I also thought about what I could give to the situation. I thought, well, she would like me to be there. We had a great relationship. I'd always told her everything I was thinking. She'd always told me everything. So I'd been with her right from the start of her relationship. So I felt like I knew her husband to be, but I'd never met him. And I thought, she wants me to be there. So that's something I can give. I can be part of making this a joyous day for her. I can also look to see if there are other people feeling like I've been feeling over the years, and I can approach them and go and talk to them. I can make sure that I'm smiling. And the other thing I did was gave myself permission to not stay for the whole thing. As long as I'm there until the point where, everybody is starting to just mingle and dance and everything else, and to the point where it starts to get really the formal bit is over. As long as I've done the formal bit and shown her that I'm celebrating with her, if I want to leave, it's okay. And that's all I focused on. And I had a lovely time just watching other people to start with. And I was able to have a quick chat with her, and I chatted to a few other people. And just at the point where I thought, I think it's okay if I go now. I'm fine with that. Her husband came over and he said to me, you're Christine, aren't you? And I said, yes. He said, you don't know anyone, do you? And I said, no. He said, you need to meet our neighbours. They don't know anyone either. And he took me over, introduced me. They were absolutely lovely. We had a brilliant time. But I could so easily have found a reason not to attend. But the important thing was, not only did I go, but I went with such different thinking that even if he hadn't done that, I had a lovely time while I was there. I was perfectly relaxed. And as it turned out, it just got better. But every single time, and I still do it now. I mean, as you said, just because we learn the lessons doesn't mean we don't need to remind ourselves. So, in all sorts of situations, I will just stop myself and say, hang on, let's just turn this around. So why do you think you've been invited to do this or be there or, share this? What have you got that you can offer to this situation? And once I start focusing on that, A, I'm calm, and B, it avoids those behaviors that create exactly what I don't want.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And even think of it in give get. you think how many managers with their team all the time, how can I get them to be better? How can I get them to perform more? How can I get them to do this? So all the focus is on how can I do that, rather than thinking, what can I give them to enable them to perform even better? What can I give them to enable to be more of a team and less of individuals just working together? What can I, and there's so many times that you hear people saying, how can I get that individual to change the way they behave? How can I get that person to work harder? How can I get them not to be late every day they come in? Rather than saying, okay, if I knew there's something that I can give them that will enable them to be more effective or more punctual or more whatever the heck it is, what can I choose to give? It just changes everything. Absolutely everything.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we mix up outcomes and get. Looking to achieve an outcome is not the same as what can I get, because the I is missing. What can I get from this? How can I get them to do that?
Yeah.
Once you remove that and say, how can we achieve this outcome?
Yeah.
So what do I need to do now to help this person give of their best so that we can all achieve this outcome?
Yeah.
And changing that language in our minds is just so important. So,
I know, it is absolutely fascinating. Now, Christine, just see if you can remember and share with the group, what are some of the most memorable, either in terms of challenging or in terms of fun, or what are the most memorable programs that come to your mind? You think, oh my God, how did I manage that? Or whatever. What are some of the most memorable things that stick in your mind?
Well, we've had a few interesting environments. Still, the most interesting is the yurt with our dear friends in Craft. That was just amazing to tip up and have basically a tent to deliver in with none of the normal facilities, and to build a flip chart stand with the two maintenance guys before everybody arrived. That was quite an experience. Yeah, definitely. So
what was the accommodation like?
Freezing. Luckily I had a few extra clothes in my car. I wore every item of clothing I had, including my coat, in bed. And I still wasn't warm. It was one of the coldest nights of the year. It just turned out it was freak weather.
And what happened if you needed to go to the bathroom in the night?
Well, either you crossed your legs very tightly or you had to brave the cold. And yeah, I managed to hold on until about 5 o'clock in the morning, but then you had to pick your way through the field to find the facilities. Yeah, it was, not our usual kind of environment. So that always stays in my mind. But wow, did we have fun? I think somebody said to me many years ago, first rule of leadership, adaptability. If you can't adapt to the circumstances you're in, you're going to be struggling. And I remember that going through my mind at the time, thinking, adaptability, okay, this is my test for the day. So, but it was absolutely amazing program. We had such a great couple of days there, but it was an experience. Yes.
And not only that, it built such a good relationship that they became a very big client, and they're still now rolling out into their organization. Yeah. So it had an amazing impact. But that was.
Yeah. So there was also one of the hotels that we used in Houston had some very interesting decor items. So I remember somebody taking a photograph of me. I hadn't realized I was standing under, they had this, I don't really know how to describe it, this massive pair of lips. If anybody has ever seen the group Kiss, it was kind of like a massive version of their lips. They also had what was a sculpture here of a sort of punk type head with spikes coming out of it, and I've forgotten what the thing this side, and I was standing trying to deliver the program in front of all of this, because that was in the room, and probably the best one was they had this, well, certainly for a program, quite inappropriate statue in the room. And the only way we could lay the chairs out, the statue was almost part of the group. we had to put managed to find a tablecloth to go over the top of it. But we had this strange being in the room with us. But that was also the program where the group introductions lasted until 4:30.
Really?
Oh.
How do you handle that, Christine?
Well, on the outside, on the inside, I'm thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? But you know what? What is incredible when you have introductions like that is almost some of the learnings that you're going to be looking at later are already coming out in the room. So when you get to certain points, instead of having to explain everything, they can just refer back to what happened for them in the room. It was the most, in terms of the team, transformational experience they could have had. It was phenomenal. But yes, we did have to do a little bit of juggling, and they did have to stay a bit late and come in a bit early. But it was so important for that team at that time. It was just the right thing. But that's not the norm, luckily. But it was.
I know. I find it incomprehensible, and really, really incomprehensible, that they don't, almost every company that we've been into when we first started working with them, they don't do anything like we do, which is, we call it introductions, call it removing the mask, whatever, sharing a bit about themselves. And I don't think ever has there been an occasion, whether when we've been working with an supposedly integrated team, and they come in and they look a bit sort of, oh God, why are we doing this introductions? We all know each other. And at the end of it, they're sort of, oh my God, I realize I didn't know you. That has never not happened for me. And I bet it has never not happened for you. Happens every single time. And you see the power of it, and how you can see this group of people come in who, in my experience, are quite often a group but not a team, a group of people working together but not a team. And over those 2 days, you see a team beginning to form. And when they come back on day 3, there's a difference. But why is it that almost nobody, until they come through the program with us, recognizes how important that is? If you want to have a team, a proper team, the most important thing that the best leaders we work with will say is key is trust. And if you don't have trust, how are you ever going to build a team? How the hell do you build trust if you don't know them? But why is it that is such a critical part of our program, but none of them seem to realize it before they come on the program? I can't get my head around it.
No, but then perhaps in lots of ways it goes back to, it's not dissimilar to how I was describing how I first thought about, how do I need to be in the workplace? Ooh, I need to dress in this way, do all of these things. And that is such a cultural norm across vast numbers of organizations, isn't it? That there is a way to be at work. And I think still we think we can only be one part of ourselves in the workplace. We have to leave everything else behind. And it's, people get to know each other because sometimes they socialize. That's usually, so if they've been working together for 20 years, they only get to know a bit about each other because they've socialized occasionally. But as you say, why wait? Why not understand each other? Because, when you're having maybe a heated debate about something, really trying to get to the bottom of what's going to be the best way forward here, when you really know people in that different way, it removes that sense of being against each other. You and I may not agree about this, but I don't feel you're disagreeing just to make life difficult for me, or, you know, just because we don't care about the same things. I understand because of where you come from and where I come from in our lives, that we have a different perspective. And we can know, this is another thing, that we can know that here. When I say that out loud, everybody knows that. But when you really take off that mask and do those introductions in that way, you start to begin to feel that. So often in the room, you can see people looking at someone as if to say, how did I not know that? Yeah. As you say, we've had that experience over and over again. And now they know it. Next time they've got to have one of those difficult discussions or difficult conversations with somebody. Suddenly it becomes so much easier because you're coming from a place of shared understanding about each other. It doesn't feel like you're on one side, I'm on the other anymore. We don't have to agree to be on the same side. It's really, it's strange. And I guess it comes back to one of the challenges we've always had with the program. People always saying to us, so what will be the outcomes then? Don't know, because it's really hard to explain how that shift takes place, but you do see it happen. You definitely see it happen.
Yeah, it is. It's like magic. It's so exciting. Now,
Yeah.
Christine, there may be some people who are listening today or going to be listening to this in the next couple of weeks because they couldn't today. You now are a key part of taking people the next stage. So they've done the program and they decide they'd like to become a trainer. Talk a little bit about what is the difference. What is the difference in terms of how much they take from what they've been learning, compared to the 3 days compared to the 10 days, and give people a little insight into what the journey's been, A, for you delivering it, and B, for people who might decide, hearing you, gosh, that's something I would like to do, to become able to deliver. Where does it take people when they do that?
Okay, so just a little question then.
Sorry about that.
First and foremost, I've always described it as being like an onion. When you do the program, you take off the outer layer of the onion and start to understand more about what's inside. When you learn to train the program, you take off at least another 2 of those layers. You really get to understand and know yourself so much better by working with people to train them to become trainers. And when you're training when you're training this program, you have to live and breathe it. You have to, because how could you stand in front of a group and say something if that's not what you're doing? It's a small environment. You can't hide. There's no Iron Man mask to put on. You have to be yourself there. So you have to be living and breathing it. Otherwise, you're wasting your breath. But because of that, it just continues to change your life and make your life richer and better every single program. I always say to groups when I'm delivering that I learn from every group. And I learn from every group, whether that's delivering the program or training trainers. I learn from every single group. And sometimes I think, does that sound a bit cliched? But I don't know how else to put it, because it is absolutely true. I learn something that I can share with the next group and the next. I learn something about myself. I learn something about the world. I just learn every single program. And I'm sure there are lots of opportunities to keep learning in many roles, but I can't believe that, you know, it comes back to that wonder. You know, it keeps that wonder alive, because I just learn such amazing things every single time. So that's my motivation. Every single program, and sometimes the ones I've been perhaps a little more concerned about, I've learned the most, not just about the world or others, but about myself. So it's constant, you know, it's a constant support in making sure that none of those beliefs come back and get a tight hold again that weren't serving me. So all of those things. But I think I'm a firm believer that nobody turns up at work ever and says, I really hope I make no difference whatsoever today. And I can honestly say that, you know, I know that in some way, shape or form, as a trainer of this program, I've been able to help people make a difference in their lives over the years. They've made the difference, but I've in some way helped for them to be able to do that. And, you know, I still get notes from people telling me about what's happened in their life since. I've got so many little stories that people have shared with me over the years that you just think, I can't imagine anything else I could have done that could have given me the privilege of having that kind of feedback and knowing that, you know what, it really was worth me getting up and turning up for that day. And where else can you get that kind of feeling day in, day out? It honestly is, if you feel you want to help people make a difference in their life, and you've loved the program, then why wouldn't you want to become a trainer? But that, having said all of that, it's not an easy ride. You said to me, what is the process? You know, on paper it looks like, well, yeah, I do a 10-day program and then I'm a trainer. It's not quite as simple as that. There's so much that you've got to be open to learning about yourself. There's an awful lot of work that needs to go in order to be able to run the program. But it's so rewarding, so rewarding.
Tell me,
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what you think about this. We assume that, and as you say, it's challenging, it's quite tough. So, and it's just for anybody who's listening, it's 10 days, it's 5 days, gap of a couple of weeks, and then another 5 days in a very small group, never bigger than 6. We keep saying that it's if you want to become a trainer. But let's say for one moment you've got somebody in an organization who says, I don't know that I really want to become a trainer per se. I know I need to deliver the pilot program just so that I can prove I've got the understanding and the knowledge and the wisdom. But what I actually want is just to become an outstanding leader that lives and breathes and walks the talk. How valuable do you think it would be to do that program just for that, not because you want to be a trainer? Because we keep saying that this is a program just to become a trainer. Is that true?
We've had it happen, haven't we? I think incredibly valuable. As I said, the biggest learning is about yourself on the trainer program. So, you know, if you think you had some insights on the program itself, multiply tenfold at least what you're going to learn about yourself during that process. So yes, by learning to deliver the program, that's how you really get deeper and deeper and deeper. Whether you go on to train lots of programs or not, you will become a wider influencer around this way of being as a leader. A, because you're living and breathing it, and B, because you can help people understand their challenges in the workplace. So, you know, you become an advocate, I don't know how else to put it, an advocate of all that is part of the program, but you become that from a place where you can give a more in-depth understanding to people. So, but the biggest thing is what you learn about yourself. So as a leader, if we're not open to learning about ourselves all the time, then we're missing a trick, aren't we? That's the more aware we are of ourselves, our impact, why things happen around us, then we have that choice to make a change if we want. If we're not aware, how can we make a change? And so if we really want to be the leader of that we would choose to be, why wouldn't we want to take that deeper and really build our own awareness? And that's what it does. Those onion layers are key. We really get to understand and perhaps take ourselves places that we think we've dealt with all of that. Yeah, well, that was years ago. And suddenly we might actually think, you know what, I understand that now. And that now changes my perspective on what I'm about to do here. So it takes us so deep. That's the opportunity. And I don't mean in a counselling kind of sense. We can go and get deep with a counsellor, can't we? It's like our own journey of choice. It takes us on to that depth. It's yeah.
Yeah, I've always believed that. I think it's great, but it's quite hard to say to somebody, take 10 days and then another 3 days out of your time just to learn more about you. But I agree with you. I mean, one of the best examples that I know, yeah, he does deliver the odd program, but my God, he's amazing. And that's Paul Stobart.
Mm.
He lives and breathes it. He walks the talk. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he, I mean, to have got a CEO, when he went through the program, he was CEO of Sage. Well, to get a CEO to take that amount of time out of the business was pretty amazing. But he said it was the toughest and the best thing he's ever done, which is great. Now, he did deliver the odd program. When he went into a new company where he was taking over as CEO, he'd always run at least one program, and nearly always for the lowest levels, which was interesting. So he did it for the lowest level because basically the message was, this is the way we want to do things here. And by the way, you've now got permission to give me feedback if I get it wrong. The other thing he did, which I thought was kind of special, was he did it for a lot of the CEOs of the suppliers that they worked with to say, this is who we are. I mean, that was amazing. So that as a company, they began to build close relationships with the suppliers, and it became very clear it came from the top. So that was really amazing. So yeah, it is a fascinating journey.
I think you said just now, though, getting somebody to take 10 days out and then another 3. But people take out such a lot of time for many kinds of development. And I've always remembered it. It's happened more than once, but I'm thinking of one particular person talking to me, and they said to me, you know what, in so many ways, this was so much harder and so much more influential for me than doing my MBA.
Oh, wow.
And I said, how do you mean? And they said, because I realized I can do all of that, but that, you know, unless I work on myself more, I still can't make the connection and have the influence that I want to have. So they weren't saying the MBA wasn't, nobody's saying any education is obviously wonderful, but people take out, not just 10 days, over years. They sometimes study leadership strategy, business management, all sorts of things. All we're saying is for just 10 days, you get to know yourself, like perhaps you've never, or an opportunity, if you wish, to get to know yourself and your potential impact on others in a way you never have before. So if that isn't a valuable learning and worth 10 days, I don't know what is, because it's just phenomenal. I think if you ask anybody who'd done it, they would say the same.
And you love delivering that 10 days, don't you?
Yeah.
That's one of the things you really, really love.
Mm.
Out of curiosity, and I know how very close you are to your son, to Paul, how much impact do you think it had in the way you brought him up, having been through the program?
It had a huge impact, and I've always said, well, in particular, looking at listening especially, and asking questions, all kinds of questions, and especially empowering questions. But I can remember the day I came back from the course. He was in his teens, and my dad had spent some time with him while I'd been away, but he was in the house when I arrived, and I had a quite small hallway, and he always used to leave all his school stuff in the hallway. And every day when I used to come home, I'd try and get in, and I'd be kicking shoes out of the way and bags and things. And so every day, my very first communication with him after school would be screeching up the stairs to come and get all his stuff and move it out of the way and all this. And I remember coming in and seeing that and stopping myself and just thinking, okay, here's your opportunity, change now. And so I walked into the kitchen and I took a look around, and he'd made himself something to eat and done a few other things, but the kitchen was really quite tidy. And I thought, that's, he's a teenager. I could easily have come in here and it looked like a complete mess. So I just called him down, and I remember him coming down as if to say, oh, what now? And I said, I just wanted to say thank you. I've come in, I've had a long journey, you've cleared up the kitchen, and I'm really grateful. I can actually start making supper straight away. I haven't got to clear up. So I'm really grateful for that. And I remember him standing there looking at me as if to say, okay, what are you on? I don't recognize this. And he walked out, and as he went, I said, do me a favor, just take your bag and shoes upstairs, would you? So he did. He never left them there again. Never. Now, that might just be coincidence or a little miracle, but it was enough for me to think I really need to focus. And so I spent the next 3 weeks asking him questions and being ready to listen. And what shocked me was all I got as an answer for at least 3 weeks was, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
And at the end of that, finally, all I heard was your voice in my head saying, stay quiet and listen, and just keep asking questions. And at the end of that 3 weeks, he finally said, well, there is this and there is this. And that was the start of the relationship we have now. It was always good, but now it's amazing because I learned that lesson. He'd never had a chance to think for himself. I always gave him his thoughts. I'd ask him a question, then answer it. So that's why, I don't know, he's looking to me to answer it for him. And that's the biggest change.
Isn't it so strange that through caring, through loving, we often use behaviors that have absolutely the wrong impact? Absolutely the wrong impact. As you know, because I didn't design the program till I was 50, by which time my kids were grown up, I got it wrong all the time. They would bring just all the time. You were lucky. You at least learned it while he was a teenager.
Perfect timing.
And we do it through loving. We do it through care. And I think that's still true in the workplace. Not all the time, but I think that's still to a large extent true in the workplace. I think we do often do it because we care and we think that's our role in life. Yeah. And I think we're brought up to think that from school. So, it's so interesting, so interesting. And we get a lot of teachers who come through the program who sort of, you can see them thinking, oh my God, but it's the way we've been brought up. Now, Christine, we've only got 1 minute left. Is there any one thing that you could share? Something that you think I maybe could have asked you that I haven't? Any one thing?
Is there any one thing? I really think that actually just stop. Just sometimes just stop and think, am I allowing myself to be myself? And if not, then I'd say come on the program and then you will. But I think just taking a moment to stop and really be aware of who you are in that moment. And that's I do that often now.
Thank you, lovely. It's been an absolute joy. I think this has been the hour that's gone the quickest for me. It has been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. I love talking to you, and you know I love you to bits. I think you're an amazing person, such an amazing trainer, and you give so much to so many. It's been a joy. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you for a winding journey. Thank you.